Mantra?
So I would repeat after you, Tuhina.
Okay.
Sure, I'll do it.
Okay.
You can do the 3 ohms, Anu.
Like the Om.
Okay, so I'll lead it. Om. Om Sahana Vavatu.
Om Sahana Vavatu.
Sahanau Bhunaktu.
Sahanau Bhunaktu.
Sahaviryam Karvavahai.
Sahaviryam Karvavahe.
Tejasvinavadhitamastu.
Tejasvina Vadhitamastu.
Ma Vidvishavahai.
Ma Vidvishavahe.
Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Om Sadashiva Samarambham.
Om Sadashiva Samarambham.
Shankaracharya Madhyamam.
Shankaracharya Madhyamam.
Asmad Acharya Paryantam.
Asmad Acharya Paryamtam.
Vande Guru Paramparam.
Vande Guru Paramparam.
Om Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu.
Om Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu.
Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha.
Gurur Devo Maheshwara.
Guru Sakshat Param Brahma.
Guru Sakshat Param Brahma.
Vande Guru Paramparam. Tasmai Guru Shri Guru. Sorry. Vande Guru Paramparam.
Tasmai Shri Guru Venama. Yeah, it's
Sorry,
different.
Yeah. Om Saraswati Namastubhyam.
Om Saraswati Namastubhyam.
Varde Kamarupini.
Varde Kama Rupini.
Vidyarambham Karishyami.
Vidyarambham Karishyami.
Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada.
Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada.
Om Karparnya Dosho Pahata Swabhavaha.
Om Karparnya Dosho Pahata Swabhavaha.
Prichhami Tvam Dharma Sammudchetaha.
Prikshami Tvam Dharma Sammudha Chetaha.
Yashreyasyan Nishchitam Bruhitan Me.
Yashtre Nishtita Bhrumitan Me.
Shishyaste Hamshadi Mam Tvam Prapannam.
Shishyaste He Shadhi Mam Tvam Prapamnanam.
Om Vangme Manasi Pratishtita.
Om Vangme Manasi Pratishtita.
Manome Vachi Pratishtitam.
Manome Vachi Pratishtitam.
Avir Avirma Edhi.
Veera Veerma Edhi.
Vedasya Ma'anistaha.
Vedasya Ma Anistaha.
Shrutam Mema Prahasihi.
Shrutam Mema Prahasihi.
Anena Adhitena.
अनेन अधीतेन
अहोरात्रान् संददामि
अहोरात्रान् संदधामि
ऋतं वदिष्यामि
ऋतं वदिष्यामि
सत्यं वदिष्यामि
सत्यं वदिष्यामि
तन्मामवतु
तन्मावतु
तद्वक्तारम् अवतु
तद्वक्तारम् अवतु
अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम्
अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम्
अवतु वक्तारम्
अवतु वक्तारम्
ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
ॐ भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः
ॐ भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवा
भद्रं पश्येम अक्षभिर्यजत्राः
भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः
स्थिरैरङ्गे
स्त्रीरङ्गे
स्तुष्ट्वाग्वम्
इष्टुवाग्वं
स्वस्तनूभिः
स्वस्तनूभिः
व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः
यशेम देवहितः यदायुः
स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः
स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवा
स्वस्ति न पूषा विश्ववेदाः
स्वस्ति न पूषा विश्ववेदा
स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः
स्वस्ति न आक्षयो अरिष्टनेमि
स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु
स्वस्ति न बृहस्पति दधातु
ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
ॐ अहं वृक्षस्य रेरिव
ॐ अहं वृक्षस्य रेरिवा
कीर्तिपृष्ठं गिरेरिव
कीर्तिपृष्ठं गिरेरिवा
ऊर्ध्वो पवित्रो वाजिनीव
ऊर्ध्वोर्पवित्रो वाजिनीव
स्वम् अमृतम् अस्मि
त्वम् अमृतम् अस्मि
द्रविडग्वं
द्रविणवं
सवर्चसं
सर्वर्चसं
सुमेधा अमृतोक्षितः
सुमेधा अमृतोक्षितः
इति त्रिशङ्कोर्वेदानुवचनम्
इति त्रिशङ्कोर्वेदानुवचनम्
ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
Thank you, Anu.
Thank you.
Tuina?
You just give me a sec. Sorry, there was a lot of background noise that I was trying to get rid of. So we have to do chapter 3 chanting. Is anyone who can volunteer this class? Go with me. Anyone wants to practice the chanting? Look, we have to do this, right? Like everyone has to.
I'll do that thing. This is Vijay.
Perfect. Thanks, Vijay. Would you like to do this on your own, or shall we go one by one?
Yeah, I didn't have time to prepare. It's a busy week, so if you can take a lead, I'll follow. Sorry about that.
No worries at all. Okay. Let's start with अथ तृतीयो अध्यायः
अति तृतीयो अध्यायः।
अर्जुन उवाच
अर्जुन उवाच
ज्यायसि चेत् कर्मणस्ते
जायसी सेत् कर्मणस्ते
मता बुद्धिर्जनार्दन
मता बुद्धिर्जनार्दन
तत्किं कर्मणि घोरे मां
तत् किं कर्मणि घोरे मां
नियोजयसि केशव
नियोजयसि केशव
व्यामिश्रेणेव वाक्येन
व्यामीश्रिनेव वाक्येन
बुद्धिं मोहयसीव मे
बुद्धिं मोहयसीव मे
तदेकं वद निश्चित्य
तदेकं वद निश्यत्य
येन श्रेयोऽहमाप्नुयाम्।
येन श्रेयोऽहमाप्नुयाम्।
श्रीभगवानुवाच
श्रीभगवान् उवाच
लोके अस्मिन् द्विविधा निष्ठा
लोके अस्मिन् द्विधि निष्ठ
पुरा प्रोक्ता मया नघ
पुरा प्रोक्त मया नघ
ज्ञानयोगेन साङ्ख्यानां
ज्ञानयोगेन साङ्ख्यानां
कर्मयोगेन योगिनां
कर्मयोगेन योगिनां
न कर्मणां नारम्भात्
न कर्मणां नारम्भा
नैष्कर्म्यं पुरुषोष्णुते
नैष्कर्म्यं पुरुषोष्णुते
न च संन्यसनादेव
न च संन्यसनादेव
सिद्धिं समधिगच्छति
सिद्धिं समधिगच्छति
न हि कश्चित् क्षणमपि
न हि क्षणमपि
जातु तिष्ठत्य कर्मकृत्
चातुतिष्यत कर्मकृत्
कार्यते ह्यवशः कर्म
कार्यते वशः कर्मः
सर्वप्रकृतिजैर्गुणैः
सर्वप्रकृतिजैर्गुणैः
कर्मेन्द्रियाणि संयम्य
कर्मेन्द्रियाणि संयम्य
य आस्ते मनसा स्मरन्
ये अस्ते मनसा स्मरन्
इन्द्रियार्थान् विमूढात्मा
इन्द्रियार्थान् विमूढात्मा
मिथ्याचारस उच्यते
मिथ्याचारस उच्यते
यस्त्विन्द्रियाणि मनसा
यस्तेन्द्रियाणि मनसा
नियम्यारभते अर्जुन
नियम आरभते अर्जुनः
कर्मेन्द्रिये कर्मयोगम्
कर्मेन्द्रिये कर्मयोगम्
असक्तः स विशिष्यते
आस्तक्ष विशिष्टते
नियतं कुरु कर्मत्वं
नियतं कुरु कर्मत्वं
कर्मज्यायो ह्यकर्मणः
कर्मज्यायो हे कर्मणः
शरीरयात्रा पिचते
शरीरयात्रा पिचते
न प्रसिद्ध्येद कर्मणः
न प्रसिद्ध्येत अकर्मणः
यज्ञार्थात् कर्मणोऽन्यत्र
यज्ञयात्रा कर्मणोऽन्यत्र
लोकोऽयं कर्मबन्धनः
लोकोऽयं कर्मणबन्धनः
तदर्थं कर्म कौन्तेय
तदर्थं कर्म कौन्तेय
मुक्तसङ्गसमाचर
मुक्तसङ्गसमाचर
सह यज्ञा प्रजा सृष्ट्वा
सगयज्ञा प्रजा सृष्ट्वा
पुरोवाच प्रजापतिः
पुरोवाच प्रजापतिः
अनेन प्रसविष्यत्वम्
अनेन प्रसविद्यस्त्वं
प्रसविष्यध्वम्
प्रसविष्यध्वम्
एषवो अस्त्विष्टकामधुक्
येषो अष्ट्वित् कामधुक्
देवान् भावयतानेन
देवान्तामय
तानेन
तानेन
ते देवा भावयन्तु वः
एदे भावयन्तु वः
परस्परं भावयन्तः
परस्परं भावयन्तः
श्रेय परमवाप्स्यथ
श्रेय परमवत्सवः
इष्टान् भोगान् हि वो देवा
इष्टान् भोगानि वो देव
दास्यन्ते यज्ञभावितः
दास्यन्ते यज्ञभावितः
तैर्दत्तान् प्रदायेभ्यो
तैर्दत्तान् अपराधाये दा sorry can you repeat that तैर्दत्तान्
प्रदायेभ्यो
प्रदाभ्येभ्यो
प्रदायेभ्यो
प्रदायेभ्यो
यो भुङ्क्ते स्तेन एव सः
यो भुङ्क्ते तेन एव सः
यज्ञशिष्टशनासन्तः
यज्ञशिष्ट न सन्तः
मुच्यन्ते सर्वकिल्बिषे
मुच्यन्ते सर्वकिल्बिषे
भुञ्जते ते त्वघं पापा
भुञ्जते ते तवं पापा
ये पचन्त्यात्मकारणात्
ये पचन्त्य आत्मकारणः
अन्नाद् भवन्ति भूतानि
अन्नाद् भवन्ति भूतानि
sorry अन्नाद् भवन्ति भूतानि
अन्नाद् भवन्ति भूतानि
पर्जन्यादन्न संभवः
पर्जन्यादन्नसम्भवः
यज्ञाद् भवति पर्जन्यः
यज्ञात् भवति पर्जन्यः
यज्ञकर्म समुद्भवः
यज्ञकर्म समुद्भवः
कर्म ब्रह्मोद्भवं विद्धि
कर्म ब्रह्मोद्भवं विद्धि
ब्रह्माक्षर समुद्भवम्
ब्रह्माक्षर समुद्भवम्
तस्मात् सर्वगतं ब्रह्म
तस्मात् सर्वगतं ब्रह्म
नित्यं यज्ञे प्रतिष्ठितम्
नित्यं यज्ञे प्रतिष्ठितम्
एवं प्रवृत्तितं चक्रम्
एवं प्रवर्तितं चक्रम्
नानुवर्तयति यः
नानुवर्तयति यः
अघायुरिन्द्रियारामः
अघायुरि इन्द्रियरामः
मोघं पार्थ स जीवति
मोघं पार्थ स जीवति
यस्त्वात्मरतिरेव स्यात्
यस्तात्मरतिः एव सयद्
आत्मतृप्तश्च मानवः
आत्मतृप्ति स मानवः
आत्मन्येव च सन्तुष्टः
आत्मन्येव सन्तुष्टः
तस्य कार्यं न विद्यते
तस्य कार्यं न विद्यते
नैव तस्य कृतेनार्थः
नैव तस्य कृतेनार्थः
न कृतेनेह कश्चन
न कृतेन कश्चिनः
न चास्य सर्वभूतेषु
न च सर्वभूतेषु
कश्चिदर्थव्यपाश्रयः
कश्चिदातय कच्चित्
व्यपाश्रयः
अर्थव्यास्पयः
तस्मात् सक्तः सततम्
तस्मात् असतः सत्तम्
कार्यं कर्म समाचर
कार्यं कर्म समाचर
असक्तो ह्यचरन् कर्म
असह्यकचर कर्म
परमाप्नोति पुरुषः
परमाप्नोति पुरुषः
कर्मण्यैभिसंसिद्धिम्
कर्मणैवि संसिद्धम्
आस्थिता जनकादयः
आस्थिता जनकायधः
लोकसङ्ग्रहमेवापि
लोकसङ्ग्रहमेवापि
सम्पश्यन् कर्तुमर्हसि
सम्पश्यन् कर्तुम् अर्हसि
यद्यदाचरति श्रेष्ठः
यद्यचातरत्रिश्रेष्ठः
तत्तदेवेतरः जनः
तत्तदेवेतच्चिनः
स यत् प्रमाणं कुरुते
स यनां sorry, can you repeat that?
स यत् प्रमाणं कुरुते
स यत् प्रमाणं यत् कुरुते
लोकस्तदनुवर्तते
लोकस्तत्तनु यन्वर्ते
न मे पार्थस्ति कर्तव्यम्
न मे कनास्
न मे पार्थस्ति कर्तव्यम्
न मे कर्तरि पार्थस्त्यम्
त्रिषु लोकेषु किंचन
त्रिषु लोके तु किञ्चनः
नानवाप्तमवाप्तव्यम्
नानवाप्तवे पापत्यम्
नानवाप्तम्
नानवाप्तम्
अवाप्तव्यम्
अवाप्तव्यम्
वर्त एव च कर्मणि
वर्धये च कर्मणि
यदि ह्ययं न वर्तेयम्
यदि हयेन वर्धयम्
जातु कर्मण्य इन्द्रतः
जातु कर्मणे इन्द्रितः
मम वर्तमानुवर्तन्ते
मम वर्तानु मन्वर्ते
मम वर्तमानुवर्तन्ते
मम वर्तमानुवर्तन्ते
मनुष्याः पार्थ सर्वशः
मनुष्या पार्थ सर्वशः
उत्सीदेयुर्मे लोका
उत्सिद्धेयुर्मेरोहा
न कुर्यां कर्म चेदहम्
sorry, can you repeat that?
न कुर्यां कर्म चेदहम्
न कुर्यां चेतहं
न कुर्यां
न कुर्यां
कर्म चेदहम्
कर्म चेतहम्
संकरस्य च कर्तस्याम्
शङ्करस्य तु कर्चस्याम् कर्दस्याम्
उपहन्यामिमः प्रजः
उपमन्याहि मप्रच्छः
सक्ता कर्मण्य विद्वांसो
सद्या कर्मण्य विद्यांसो
यथा कुर्वन्ति भारत
यथा कुर्वन्ति भारतः
कुर्यादस्थितं सक्तः
कुर्यात्रन्ति मन्षतः
चिकीर्षु लोकसंग्रहम्
त्रिक्रीषुलोकसङ्करहम्
चिकीर्षु
चिकीर्षु
लोकसंग्रहम्.
लोकसङ्ग्रहम्.
Yeah, and the last one for today. न बुद्धिभेदं जनयेत्
न बुद्धिभेदं जनयेत्
अज्ञानां कर्मसंज्ञिनाम्
अज्ञाकारसंगिनहाम् अज्ञानां कर्मसंगिनाम्
जोषयेत् सर्वकर्माणि
जोषयेत् सकर्माणि
विद्वान् युक्तः समाचरन्.
विद्वान् युक्तसमाचरन्.
Very nice, Vijay. Thank you so much for the seva.
Thank you.
So we closed last class on chapter 5, shloka 4, 5, 6. Shloka 6. So we'll start with Shlok 7. So as we said in this class, basically we are trying to really understand what does true renunciation mean? What does sannyas really mean, right? Typically, the way we understand sannyas, I think that definition is going to be questioned in this chapter again and again, right? And they will, Bhagwanji will make us understand how we should really recognize true sannyas. Just because somebody walks away from the duties of the world or puts on saffron robes does not make such a person a sannyasi, right? And that's typically what we think of, the imagination or the visualization that comes up when we think of sannyasi. So that is being that idea is being demolished in this chapter, and we are going to learn what really true renunciation means. So within that context, the difference between karma yogi and sankhya yogi is also being discussed. And I think we went through some of these shlokas where it was made clear how the attainment for both a Sankhya yogi and Karma yogi is exactly the same. It's only the path that leads us there is different, right? And we have understood what are the characteristics of a Sankhya yogi in the last couple of in the last paragraph. So now we're going to read what are the characteristics of a Karma yogi, what makes a Karma yogi. Okay, so Anita, will you read with us?
Yes.
Let's start with the connection. Connection.
Now the Lord describes the characteristics of Karma Yogi.
Yoga yukto vishuddhatma.
Yoga yukto vitashtamaha.
Vishuddhatma.
Vishuddhatma.
Vijitatma jitendriyaha.
Vijitatma jitendriyaha.
Sarvabhutatma bhutatma.
Sarvabhutatma bhutatma.
Kurvannapi na lipyate.
Kurvannapi na lipyate.
Yoga yukto is one who is bound to the yoga, which means karma yogi. Vishuddha atma, one who has a pure antahkaran. Okay. Vijitatma is one whose mind is under their control. Jitendriyaha, one who has won over their senses. A person who has won over their senses. Sarva bhutatma bhutatma is one who sees Lord in all the people or in all the beings. Kurvanapi, even while doing actions. Na lipyate, does not get attached or involved.
Tuhina, actually we have read this last week. Till 7th we finished.
Really?
No, we didn't.
I thought we started it and then we decided that
No, I think we stopped at 6.
Okay.
And we don't.
Okay. Anyways, let's just
go back to.
Yeah.
It's a very good.
Revise.
It's a very good shlok nonetheless. It's very relevant for us karma yogis. So let's just go through it, and we'll talk about it quickly. Since we've already started it, we may as well complete.
Okay. A selfless karma yogi, subduing the mind and exercising restraint on the senses, the immaculate in intellect, and identifying the individual consciousness with the universal consciousness, of the Supreme, while performing all action, remains perfectly uninvolved in them. Uninvolved attitude of Karma Yogi. All actions have their origin in diversity. A man performs an act only when he desires a modification in his state. If the mental state is to be modified, some mental work is done. If the physical state is to be modified, physical work is done. The entire classification of behavioral pattern depends on this. But
So
while
here so this is the example we've been talking about in the last couple of classes as well, that as karma yogis, which is what our path is, we cannot sit still. We will always necessarily be driven to action of some sort or the other, right? Like if try taking off one day, you might sit still for an entire day. Second day, you might still be able to sit still. By third day, you would have all this energy. Oh, let's go for a run. Let's go work out. Let's go watch a movie. Let's go out to eat. There is this need to be in constant action. And that energy that we have forces us to create action and modifications in our lives. So in this, I love the explanation of this line, that a man performs an act only when he desires modification in his state. And we, the way we are and the prarabdha that we have, we are constantly seeking that change of modification in state. Constantly want to be slightly thinner, want to make more money, want to be able to give more back to family, want our son or our child to do a little bit more, so help them succeed, help them do more. It's always this state of modification that drives us. But the trick with Gita is not for that state of modification to define our happiness. Right? We are born with these qualities to perform and do work and do duty, but our happiness should not be dependent on these eventual state of modifications that we're looking for. We should know that is our duty, we will do it, and we work with that particular bhav, right? So this is constant for every single person in the world. This is the karma part of karma yogi that all of us have as a given state of mind. Yeah. Now we'll talk about how the karma part, we make it a yoga. We make it a connect with Bhagwanji. And that's what we will talk about. This first state we all already live with. It's our natural state. Now we need to understand how do we make this a divine state. And that's the yoga element of karma yogi. Yeah.
But while performing action or dealing with others, the attitude of Karma Yogi has the following 4 distinctive characteristics. The immaculate intellect. While performing a duty of Karma Yogi, does not have an eye of self-gratification. So the intellect of such a man is free from the taint of expectation of any gain. His actions are not influenced by any feeling of aversion to anyone, or his intellect is free from cynicism and fault finding. Free of both these blemishes, he is the immaculate objective intellect.
So here's the thing, right? Our understanding of a person who's intelligent in the world, typically we say a person's intelligent if he has a lot of knowledge, he reads a lot, he has very good analysis, very good at maths, all of those things. And out here, it's very interesting because it says all of that is okay, but having a real immaculate intellect is a person who is controlling their mind, their primal animal nature. And the second thing the intellect is controlling is ego. So the very first line, which is does not have eye for self-gratification. Self-gratification is ego. Because you're doing it for your likes, your praise. You're doing it for your pride. And the second aspect, which he's talking about here, is it's free from cynicism, fault finding, likes and dislikes. Only the intellect can play that role to help you have that distinction. I'm not doing this for my likes and dislikes, and I'm not doing this for my pride. If you allow pride to come in, if you allowed ichha to come in, then your intellect is not being used. You're operating from your ego and you're operating from your mind. So the very first aspect of a karma yogi is to sharpen the intellect, which is why we do all our sadhana. Right?
And sharpen
Sorry.
the intellect, meaning what? That, intellect is something that can either face the mind and the senses and be directed by them, or it can face upwards towards the divine and be directed by the God. So sharpening the intellect means turn it towards the divine and let the divine direct it.
So if you're not doing anything out of self-gratification, why are you doing it? For yagya bhav, for his pleasure. You're doing your duty because it is what you have to do for his pleasure. Because there's divinity in everyone. Right? So the most important and the first important part for karma yogi is to have a sharpened intellect. And the sharpened intellect will always direct us between not just right and wrong, but good and better. So there is this Mayaji, passed away, right? And Mayaji ke liye yesterday there was a I forwarded Shraddhanjali, right? And they had a PowerPoint presentation. And so just to give context, so Mayaji was Babaji's daughter. So Babaji and Babuji were the two people who started this Gita Parivar. And Babuji was a Sankhya Yoga and a realized saint, and Babaji was a Karma Yoga, a Grahast. Us Grahast mein Mayaji was born. So Mayaji was her daughter.
Sorry, Abhinav, you got a little bit thing wrong there. So she wasn't born to Babuji. She was in their neighborhood, but she used to come to the ashram every day, and pretty much like she was just part of that from the very age.
Okay, so I got it wrong because yesterday they kept referring to her as the daughter, but I'm guessing it means
They treated her like a daughter.
Okay.
She was
But
like neighborhood.
Yeah, I'm sure. So there were two things. The one thing that stood out for me, which is relevant to this immaculate intellect, is she kept saying that, or people kept telling that whenever you asked Mayaji a question, her question always started and ended with the Gita shloka. And she kept saying, and she kept emphasizing in all her classes, that all your decision making and thought process has to start with the scriptures and then go towards sansar. And that's the only way you'll ever be able to decide between good and moral. So there could be a lot of things that could be good for you, but not good for your morality. There could be a lot of things that are seemingly very good for your family, but they're taking you away from divinity. And the only way to connect the two is to have Gita as the starting point of everything. And she said and so when I'm reading this shloka of immaculate intellect, it's reminding me of Mayaji's conversation or the story yesterday, where she'd probably memorized most of the shlokas, if not all of the shlokas, but they came to her as a starting point for every conversation with sansar.
That's also the reason why we need to memorize our shlokas, because when we need to use them, we won't have book in our hand, right? We're not carrying it around with us all the time. So it's important to memorize shlokas just as we memorize, numbers. Like we memorize 1 to 100 as base. If we don't know the basic numbers,
or tables.
nothing else that we can do. So we need to memorize chapter 3, chapter 12, and chapter 15. 3 chapters if we can memorize them. Then there are a few other shlokas on top of these 3. And once we've memorized them, they basically provide a basic foundation for pretty much most of the life situations you will face. So they will come to you in that moment. That's why it is like it's asked of all of us to memorize those particular shlokas.
Subdued mind. A karma yogi keeps the mind under complete subjugation. The natural tendency of the mind is to run towards what is its liking, irrespective of whatever it is proper or not. But with the mind under subjugation, the karma yogi decides all actions not on balance of likes and dislikes, but on that of proprietary and improprietary alone. The completely expurgating the senses of likes and dislikes. Restraint.
So we've talked about this a lot, right? About the mind. And one of the things that is coming to me in the last few months, and not just Gita, if you read any other book, like I'm right now, I just finished reading a book about a guy who's an autobiography of a person who became a Navy SEAL and then an ultra marathon runner. And you realize people are attracted to running and endurance running and ultra marathons and all these severe physical traits. It's not about the physical hardships as much as it's a tool for them to control their mind, right? Nobody in their right mind willingly wants to put their body through so much pain, but they love that high because they love that experience where they've subdued their mind. And when you read all these athletes and their stories, they all say that once you subdue the mind, that's when they experience the real. That's when they're in the zone. That's when they're in the flow. And all these top level athletes, whether it's Michael Jordan, Sachin, Ricky Ponting, they all have talked about being in that zone. And that's only achieved when you subdue the mind. Because as long as your mind is active, you are fully engaged with sansar. Because the mind is sansar. As long as your mind is chattering, you are sansar. That's all you're listening to. Only when you subdue that, then you have a chance to listen to that inner voice of yours. So a lot of people say, oh, I can't seem to find my inner voice. And like, how do you know which voice is the inner voice? You don't need to know. You just need to quieten the mind, and those voices will speak to you very, very deeply and profoundly. So there was an example that I wrote down here. This was a few years ago. I think this is when Vedant was just about born. I'm not sure if it's a relevant example anymore, but I'll share it in the list. We were at the emergency of a hospital, or we were at a hospital, and I happened to be standing in front of the emergency entrance. Okay. Now I'm talking about a karma yogi. This car pulled up, screeched, halted. This mother jumped out of the car. She was wearing a white dress, and she was holding her son, I think, in her arms, who was very, very badly injured. And her dress, like a white dress, was filled with blood. The injury was very, very gory on the leg. I don't remember the details also. She got out of the car, the friend went and parked the car, and I was standing right there. What was very interesting is the baby was crying. The baby was really, really uncomfortable. The mother, playing the role of the mother, was absolutely focused and stern. And that example came to me because she knew exactly what she had to do. She was not, she was as close to her son as possible to take care of him, but she was controlling all her emotions. She wasn't afraid. She knew the right thing to do was to bring him to the hospital and then trust that the doctors would know what is best for her child. So she used her intellect to bring the child there rather than to give in to fear, to give in to, oh my God, what's happening, crying, or any of those things. Now, all of this is relatable because all of us are parents. And we've done this for our children a number of times. But we don't do this for our own selves. For our own selves, we cave in very quickly to interactions with Sansar. Why me? We stop using our own intellect to drive conversation forward. We start becoming far more affected when things happen to us as individuals. And that's when Gita needs to happen. Because that sharpens the intellect to make sure you can continue to be that focused mother for your own self and not be worried about the pain, the suffering, the inevitable experiences we have to go through because of our prarabdha. And then go on the slippery slope of why me and blame game and criticism and God doesn't love me and yada, yada, yada.
Actually, on that note, right, like last weekend, I happened to partially attend Vinika Didi's class, and she gave an example which I thought was very beautiful in the class. So the example she gave was that there was this log of wood who wanted to, he had seen other beautiful furniture. So when a woodcutter came in, that log of wood basically told the woodcutter, please make me into something beautiful. Okay, I also want to look beautiful. Make me into something beautiful. So the woodcutter said, fine. And he took the log home. And when he started axing it, that log of wood started crying like, oh my God, like, what are you doing to me? This is not what I wanted. I just want to become something beautiful. And the woodcutter said, well, if you want to become something beautiful, then you will have to undergo pain. I'll have to cut you. I'll have to sharpen you. I'll have to change you. You can't be beautiful the way you are, right? You're just raw right now. And the woodcutter kept doing its work, and the log was really like, it went through a lot. It had to be cut, it had to be modified, so it went through a lot of tap. And after that entire tap got over, he realized that he had been converted into a Bhagwan Ji ki murti, into a idol of the Lord, which was then placed in a very beautiful temple. So the result of that, the import of that was that, if we want to become something beautiful, we have to go through that pain, whatever it may be, wherever it may come from, right? And everything that happens around us, whatever happens to us, is that woodcutter sharpening and cleaning us up to convert us into that something beautiful that can be kept at the altar of the God. So instead of saying why me if something goes wrong, it should be taken as a tap and like with gratefulness. Whatever is happening for the best interest. We just have to find Lord's hand in everything that happens around us. And when we start to see that Lord's hand is when we will start to use, that's when our intellect is coming into picture. Whether we like it or not like it, right? Mind, the senses, these are the seat of likes and dislikes. So they will naturally create that experience will happen as long as the body is there, as long as the mind is there, it will create likes and dislikes. You will, when the senses come in touch with the sense objects, they will create whatever is their dharma to create. Okay, it is dharma of the fire to burn. So if you put your hand and your skin comes in contact with it, you will feel that heat, you will feel a burn. It is its dharma. And so your body is doing its dharma, the fire is doing its dharma. And with your intellect, you understand that, but you don't get involved in it. You use your intellect to accordingly understand this is the dharma of this is the dharma of that, and this is how you will navigate the world, right? So,
So Kumar always says, which is, pain is real, but suffering is a choice. And if you've ever interacted with a pain doctor, they always say, 70 to 80% of pain is mental. 20-30% is real body pain. And so,
I
for
can
example,
vouch for that. I can vouch for that. When I was a kid, I used to feel very afraid of needles. So take me for an injection. There was nobody who could get me an injection except for my dad, because he was the only one in front of whom I will sit quietly and get an injection. Like my mom, like it's impossible for my mom to come and get me an injection because I'm going to cry, shout, scream, and not allow anybody to touch me, right? So I remember one of the doctors who changed my outlook to this. I was, I think, in 7th or 8th standard. And I was like crying about like injection, I don't want one. So he sat down and he actually talked to me and told me like, what are you really afraid of? And then he told me, pinch your finger, pinch it really hard. And I pinched it really hard. He said, are you afraid of this? I was like, no. It's like, okay, so just keep pinching it and I'm going to give you an injection and you will realize that there is nothing that is going to, what you're pinching yourself right now is way more painful than anything I'll give you. And that's it. I did that and I realized that actually from then on, every time I had to get an injection, I would, pinch myself. And I realized how much of that was just in the mind. Eventually I got over that fear because I started to realize that 80 to 90% of the suffering I was going through about an injection was just in my mind. And in real injection is just so quick that like over a period of time, then I kind of completely got over that fear of needle. But it was very real for me, very, very real, until when I was living it and before I realized how much of that was just my own making. So we
Restraint.
Yeah.
Okay. Restraint senses. With the mind under complete subjugation, the Karma Yogi keeps under restraint the 5 senses of action and the 5 senses of perception. The natural tendency of the senses is to run towards worldly object. They are like windows opening outward. Exercising restraint on the senses, the Karma Yogi allows only those perceptions or objects which are useful in performing of the duties. Strictly bearing out perception or objects which the senses chose only to their gratification.
So there is a hierarchy here that this shloka very beautifully highlights. The hierarchy very clearly states that the first thing any karma yogi has to do is work on intellect. Without that, you cannot control mind, and you will not have the distinctions to make what is right for what your senses are and for your duty, the right decisions for your duty. So the hierarchy here is very clear. First, sharpen intellect, read the Gita, do your swadhyaya, understand the principles, question the principles, implement the principles, see for yourself that this is working. The second step is subduing the mind, because you cannot control your senses without controlling your mind. We've discussed this in a few other shlokas in the past as well, right? Like if you're saying that you're going to give up alcohol because that's not good for your body, but your mind is constantly thinking about it, then there's no point of that fast. Even though in action you may not have done it, your mind, your bhav is not aligned, that meaning doesn't exist, right? So
why is that so? Why is that so? Because you may fast today, tomorrow, because your mind is forcefully thinking about it, eventually it will create enough longing. Thoughts will get converted into longing. The longing becomes a desire, and desire will then create an action. That is why it is important to understand that a fast where you are forcibly keeping your senses away from the sense objects, but your mind is engaged with them, is not a real fast. And as we saw in chapter 2, such a person is considered a hypocrite. It's very clearly mentioned, such a person is called a hypocrite. It can happen in the beginning as we try and control and renounce our involvement in the senses, but know that this is the path. Eventually my mind has to be completely detached from it. And the mind, how do you detach your mind from the sense object? Is by using your intellect. Use your intellect to know what is good for you, what is not good for you. And when you keep reinforcing that, and you give something else to your mind to hold on to, you don't want to, for example, in my case, I do not want to drink too much of tea or coffee. Now, I can't just simply say I will not drink tea or coffee because it's a habit, right? So for me to take it away, I have to replace the vacuum that gets created by not having tea or coffee with something else. Can this be herbal tea? Can this be warm water? Can this be lemon juice? It has to be replaced with something else for my mind to hold on to. So give you, when you take something away, then replace it with something else. So here the mind has to be replaced from the sense objects to, something that's more divine in nature. That will help us restrain our mind as well as the senses.
And the way the hierarchy works is, until you do these 3 steps, you will not experience the fourth step, which is universal consciousness. Until your intellect is not sharpened to redirect the mind, and until you don't do that, you will not be able to decide what is good for your senses, what is good for your body. You will still go for that extra half piece of naan and paneer because it was just so well made today, right? You will, because you're sharpened, your mind is not yet controlled on what is right for your duty, which is to eat for your body and for your health. Until you don't do that, till we are fighting that fight in our own selves, between our own conversations in our head, we'll not be able to experience universal consciousness, which is why we focus a lot on Antakaran ki Shuddhi. That is the starting point and the only point for us to work on, for us to fully manifest and express divinity in this lifetime. And which is also where Nam Jap comes in a very beautiful way, which is, as you do Nam Jap over and over and over again, it is, you're training your mind to become quieter and quieter and quieter. So, I shared this story about a few classes ago about when a person is self-realized, fully self-realized, they find eating, drinking, talking with people difficult because their mind is fully engaged in meditation. So they're constantly getting in and observing all this divine energy and all these data points where they're just constantly in that state of siddhi, of meditation. So they find eating and drinking and meeting people very, very difficult and tiring. They would rather spend 15 hours a day just meditating because that's their natural state. Sansar is their unnatural interaction and state. For us, as well as we attain self-enlightenment, we will reach that stage, but without giving ourselves that anchor of Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, we can't just focus on our breath, right? You can sit for 15 minutes, focus on your breath, and that can be your start for a meditation. But as you're going through the day, it's very difficult to meditate and walk, meditate and do your activity. We've just not trained, we're not there yet. That's why the Nam Jap becomes very useful. It quietens the mind while you do your daily activity. It is, and there are lots of places you will start seeing where you can use it, where otherwise your mind would go haywire, think about the past, think about how people praised you, think about ye aisa hai, vaisa hai, all of that will come to your mind. But if you replace that, do that same action, but replace your mind chatter with Nam Jap, you've already won the game. Yeah. So controlling mind and cleaning our Antakaran is the biggest thing for us to work on. And when we do that, we become one with universal consciousness. And that's the next point.
identification with the universal consciousness. Karma Yogi sees everyone as the manifestation of the one universal self. Such a man respects the feeling of everyone. Constant reflection of this helps him in identifying himself with the universal consciousness. Equipped with these four characteristics, a Karma Yogi functions in such a way that while performing duties with complete sympathy for everyone, the action do not suffer from the taint of self-gratification.
So what does it mean to do duty with identification with universal consciousness? Right? What does that mean? What does that really mean? In other words, it means seva. That when you are in full identification with universal consciousness, you are constantly serving and doing seva of Bhagwanji through every action and every duty, because that's what you see everywhere. And that's a bhav, that's an emotion we all have experienced because we all have been to temples. And in that temple, you quieten yourself, you do it with a certain amount of reverence. Whatever offer you, when you make for a festival or before a puja, you dress up, you look nice, you get flowers, and you don't just put the flower there, right? You place it with a gentle touch, with certain amount of reverence, because you believe that idol represents Bhagwanji. Now, when you become one with universal consciousness, you believe Bhagwanji is in everything and everywhere. So there is a natural reverence in every action because you're doing it for his pleasure. That's what it means being Karma Yogi, when you are one with universal consciousness.
Yeah, but I'll add one more thing here, that we will still be practical, right? When you have to treat everything with reverence. But in Hindi, I think the sentence that Kumar always uses is that vyavahar mein, vichar mein ya bhav mein samanta, but vyavahar mein bhinnata. That means you will treat everyone at a bhav level. You have the same bhav for everyone and everything, but in terms of your behavior will be slightly different based on the context, right? So for example, love for everyone, right? But when you have to experience love for everyone, but the way you express that love will be different based on the relationships, based on the people. So the way you will express your love for a child will be different from the way you express your love for your spouse versus how you express your love for your siblings or your parents or your teacher or your colleagues, right? You can't treat everyone like, for example, like your wife, right? You can't have the same experience with every other woman, right? So, but that doesn't mean that you cannot love everyone. It's just that vyavahar mein bhinnata, that expression is going to be different. Similarly, there is going to be reverence for gold as much as there is reverence for stone. But that doesn't mean that you will keep stone inside your your treasury and you're inside your locker and you will keep stone outside, because like they are all the same and God is in the same thing, right? So there has to be the right type of behavior for everything, but bhav level has to be the same amount of reverence, because the utility of gold is there for something else, and utility of iron is for something else, the utility of stone is for something else. You have to be grateful for each one of them to be in your life for the utility that all three of them are bringing in, but you will treat them the way they are supposed to be treated. You get the difference, right? Like you will you wear slippers in your feet, and you should be grateful for the slippers that we have because they are protecting our feet. But you will always keep them outside the house. They will not come inside the house, and you will not sleep with them in your bed, right? So behaviorally, externally, they are going to be they have to be relevant to what the thing is, but at the level of bhav, you have to be grateful for each one of them and treat them accordingly, Does that make sense? Okay, so Naina, would you go next?
Connection. After this description of the characteristics of a karma yogi, the Lord now proceeds to describe the characteristics of a Sankhya yogi.
Naiva kinchit karomiti
Naiva kinchit karomiti
yukto manyeta tattvavit.
yukto manyeta tattvavit.
Okay, next one is a very long sentence. We'll break it down.
Okay.
Pashyan, Shravan, Sprishan, Jigran.
Read the English. Pashyan, Shruvan, Sprishan,
One. Pashyan.
Grahan.
So let's read one by one so it becomes easier.
Okay.
Pashyan,
Pashyan,
Shranvan,
Shranvan,
Sprishan,
Sprishan,
Ajigran.
Ajigran.
Yeah, Ajigran. So now we'll do it together, okay? Pashyan, Shranavan, Sprishan, Jigran.
Pashyan, Shranvan, Sprishan, Ajigran.
Very nice. Ashnan, Gachan, Swapna, Shwasan.
Ashnan, Gachan, Swapna, Swashan.
Yes, very nice. Pralapan, Visrajan, Grahan.
Pralapan, Visrajan, Grahanan.
Yeah. Unmishan, Nimishannapi.
Unmishan, Nimishannapi.
Very nice. Indriyani, Indriyartheshu.
Indriyani, Indriyarteshu.
Vartant iti dharayan.
Vartantiti Darayan.
Life is nisandeh, without any doubt. Kinchit, kuch bhi, anything. Karomiti is doing. Yukto is one who is always connected. So a Sankhya yogi in this context. Manyate is mane or conviction. Tattvavit, one who knows the reality, one who knows the tattva gyan, one who knows the reality. Pashyan is seeing, Shranvan is hearing, Sprishan is touching, Ajigran is smelling, Anshan is eating, Gachan is moving to go somewhere, Swapnan is dreaming, which means sleeping, and Shwasan is breathing. Pralapan is talking, speaking. Visrajan is giving up. Grahan is accepting. So the opposite of Visrajan. Unmishan is opening. And Nimishan is closing. So Unmishan and Nimishan basically refer to opening or closing of the eyes. Indriyani, with all the senses, Indriyartheshu, for the sense objects, Vartant iti dharayan. So they basically means that that they are basically Vartant is doing something when you're engaging with something. Iti is like this. Dharayan is to understand or undertake something. धारण करना किसी चीज को. To take up. Yeah, go ahead.
The Sankhya yogi, having a direct perception of reality, has the steadfast conviction that it is the senses, not he, which move amongst the sense objects, while performing the acts of seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving, sleeping, breathing, speaking, letting go, seizing, opening, and closing the eyes. complete detachment of the Sankhya Yogi from the functioning of the senses. In these shlokas, the Lord has described the outlook of a Sankhya Yogi when the senses or the organs of the body get involved with or withdraw from the worldly objects. The Lord explains that such a man is convinced that he has no connection with the objects of the world. He completely disconnects himself from the functioning of his senses or his body and thinks himself to be as detached from them as a mechanic is from his machinery. He holds the view that the senses are operating with their objects according to the dictates of their nature. The material constituting the input of the machine is acted upon by the various parts of the machine automatically, and output is given out by the machine. The mechanic oversees the operations of the machine, but himself does not handle the material during the operation. In the same manner, a Sankhya Yogi maintains the outlook of being quite unaffected by the actions done by the senses. Such a man is thus quite detached from the involvement of the senses in their objects. Whatever happens in the world around him is like a dream to him, and he has no needs and no expectations. This attitude appears to be very easy, but to conform to it truly is like walking on a razor's edge.
I thought this example of mechanic and machinery just hits the point quite hard, right? It's quite easy to understand. And the other story that I've said now enough number of times, but I'll remind everyone, is the story about the two monks who want to cross the river, who cross the river, right? And there is that beautiful woman, right? I don't need to repeat the story, right? Everyone knows it. So in that story, the crux of that story is what? That it's okay to interact with sense and sense objects, but it's not okay for that to go into your mind. Once it goes into your mind is when you have those likes and dislikes and longings and cravings and all those thoughts well beyond you've interacted with that sense object. But for a Sankhya Yoga, sense and sense objects will interact. They will, as Tuna said, they will perform based on its nature. But he doesn't let that reach his mind. His mind is affixed on divine consciousness. And that's the difference.
And when we had read in, in the last chapter, when we were reading about various types of yagyas, there was a yagya which said that, that whatever happens with the sense, in the interaction between the sense and the sense objects, they get burned at the sense level itself. They don't even reach the mind. That was one of the types of yagyas that we had learned about. So this is the type of yagya that you see here. Whatever happens, you're not going to get affected by it. And you will use the senses and the sense objects. You understand what their nature is, what their dharma is. And then you use it wherever it is required to be used. But you don't get involved in it. As an example, getting angry, anger can be used as a very effective tool in certain cases, right? So if you were to do this properly, then you would recognize that in a certain situation, anger can be used very effectively to drive home the right point. Okay, so you use that tool in that moment, but without it affecting the calmness of your inner self. You are not angry. You're using anger as a tool, but inside of yourself, you're completely calm. You're not upset. You use it, you let it go, and you move on, right? So this is just an example of a certain tool. Similarly, all your sense objects, the actions of perception, your senses of perception as well as senses of action. You can use them as effective tools, understand what is their pros, what are their cons, where they are effective, where they are not effective, and then you use them wherever it is required. Not attach any likes or dislikes towards them. Oh, anger is very bad, I will never get angry. Yeah, don't ever get angry, but there's nothing wrong with anger. Anger is an effective tool in certain situations. Right? Similarly, oh, I will always be kind-hearted. Yes, that's the right thing to do, and that is the right type of attitude to have. But like, kshama shobhati us bhujang ko jiske paas karal ho. So kshama, even like forgiveness, is not a tool to be used in every situation. It's neither good nor bad. So we need to have that discernment about everything in this material world. There's nothing good, there is nothing bad. Right? There are no, everything is actually good as long as we understand where they need to be used. And there is no thing in this material world that does not come with its flip side. It's the world's nature is to be dual, which means whatever you pick up in this world will have its both sides of the equation. So if you continue to use that by itself in every situation, at some point of time, it will become wrong in that context, 100%, because it will never fit every single context. And that's true for anything and everything in this world, which kind of helps us change our perception, the way we look at the world, and we start creating judgments about people, about situations, about things, right? We have to remember that there is no right or wrong in every situation. Everything is bound by a context. Everything is contextual.
Let me just clarify and add to what Tuvina is saying and what she said about anger specifically. Is there is a chapter that comes later on, and of course Rita and Kavita know about it, is where they have divine qualities and they have demonic qualities. And anger is very clearly mentioned as a demonic sansaric quality. It's not a divine quality. It's not our innate nature. And like we read in chapter 3, Kama Esha, Krodha Esha, anger and desire will necessarily stem if you chase desires. You only get angry because you want a particular outcome and it doesn't happen, or you wanted an outcome and a different outcome happened, so it makes you angry. The moment you experiencing anger, you are already invoking your animal nature or your demonical nature, right? What Tuvina is referring to is the context where, as the same context that you will discipline your child if he insists on going close to a bonfire to put his hand in, right? But you're doing it out of a base of love. And you're using your expression of maybe increasing the volume of your voice to get his attention. Maybe you're holding him and holding his face, like I've done this, just so that he looks at you and he's not like all over the place. Or you hold his ears in a way to remind him you have ears to listen. Don't just like listen to what I'm saying. These are all, and you do it forcefully. So to somebody else, it may look like you're getting angry, but you're actually doing it just to calm the person down, right? And that's coming out of love, right?
Exactly.
That's what we need to strive to be.
Yeah. So like anger, when we say it's a demonical quality and everything, so then you're like, okay, so if it's a demonical quality, why does it even exist, right? Why does it exist? Why have demonical things? It's a part of this world. So it's been created by Lord as well, right? So why has it been created? So the answer to that is that there is a need for everything in a certain context. That's why it has been created, right? Like sun and chaya, what is shadow, right? Sun and shadow, light and shadow, they are both required for this world to function effectively. Everything, but you need to know when do I need to use shadow and when do I need to use light. right? And they all have their own uses, but it shouldn't become me. They don't have to become me. I have to use them as tools. So a Sankhya yogi understands that, and also understands that there are the 3 gunas of nature which define how my body reacts to certain things, to certain situations, how my antahkaran is behaving in different situations. And he completely detaches himself, because and how does he detach himself? Is through his intellect. He'll see that this is happening. My antahkaran is behaving like this. So I go in a certain situation and, my antahkaran will react differently than Abhinav's antahkaran, even if we are both in exactly the same situation, experiencing it at the same time. My bodily reactions, my mental reactions, my emotional reactions are going to be different from his, because the 3 gunas that are defining him is going to do things differently because of his prarabdha, his antahkaran, etc., than mine, right? But we can both use our intellect and see what is happening. I can see how you are behaving, and I can see how I am behaving, and be able to discern that, oh yeah, it is happening because of these 3 gunas that are doing what they are supposed to do, but not get affected by them. Be able to observe it in the background and say, okay, this is how it is happening. It's okay. I am feeling sad right now because, it is certain things are happening around me. That's okay. It's okay to feel sad, or I am beginning to get upset. Okay, I can observe myself getting upset or being angry or being sad or in any emotional state, right? Something has happened and this is causing my emotional state to be thus. It's okay. This emotion exists, but I will not act from that emotion. I will experience it fully. I will accept it, and I will say thank you and move on. Okay, but not act from it. And that's what a Sankhya yogi does. For as a Karma yogi, we are still using our intellect. For a Sankhya yogi, this state is natural. He doesn't have to think. He doesn't have to have an intellect to use there. He's just constantly, he has reached, like, he has moved from doing to being. As a Karma yogi, we are still doing, we are thinking, oh, I have to be this, oh, this is happening. A Karma yogi is being that at all points of time. So it's just so natural to him that it's a second nature.
Just one question. Wouldn't it be, suppose, when you get angry, but taking a positive, I mean, in my experience, personal experience, taking a positive action out of that anger has been like, I have acted as a rebel sort of a thing and all that, but the outcome has been good rather than, going negative, like in terms of experiences. So if I get angry and I take a right decision, like of doing something better because this experience was good and it created anger in me, and I should do this so that, I don't experience this or others don't experience this sort of a thing. That would be a right way to go, or is it like just experiencing the anger and letting it go, not responding to it, would be a right decision?
So I would say any kind of negative emotion, right? Any kind of negative emotion, whether it's sadness or anger or anxiety or upset, if you behave from the space of that emotion, when you are in a state of emotion, even if it's a good emotion, right? Even if it's a good emotion, when you're acting from that space, you're basically not in a state of yoga, because yoga means equilibrium, equipoise, right? We've read that, right? So if we are not in a space of equipoise, then we are not connected. If we are not connected, our actions will never be efficient. They may be good enough, they will never be efficient, right? So you get angry, you get upset, you get outraged because of an action. Now there is a purpose for that feeling. The purpose for that feeling is to create certain amount of energy, like a certain amount of escape velocity, for us to do certain things. We can use that escape velocity, we can use that energy to initiate certain actions. However, before we do that, we need to be in a state of equipoise to be able to see, how am I using this energy? Why am I using this energy? And what is the purpose? Is the purpose, I am angry and my ego has been affected and I want to get back at somebody, and thus whatever I'm doing is to strengthen my ego? Then it is not an action that is taken. Even if from a material world point of view, you may have created a certain positive outcome, but from a spiritual point of view, you have created certain negative prarabdha for yourself. And you will have not negative only from a point of view of bondage. You may have created a good outcome. You may be living through some good results, right? Like you may end up with a happy outcome from a material point of view, but still you will need to come back into this world to live through that, right? So it's negative from a point of view of bondage. So when we are talking about positive and negative, it is not from a material world outcome perspective at all. From a spiritual perspective, are you under compulsion to live through it, or are you reaching a stage of freedom where you can choose how you want to live, right? So I would say,
And
use these as a tool, but not act from it. Abhinav, sorry.
So I'd add that this is where also the mind is very tricky, because it can justify everything. And it's very smart at justifying things that are good for us from sansaric perspective. Especially from an immediate outcome perspective, from an immediate self-gratification, or a self, makes you feel good type of thing, it will immediately justify it. Whether it's extra laddu, or it's bribery, or it's even hitting a child, or hitting somebody else. What lato ke bhoot? What's that muhavra?
Baaton se nahi mante.
Whatever. Lato ke bhoot haathon se nahi mante. Whatever. Jo bhi. Baaton se nahi mante. So you justify it all, and this is where the scriptures become very important, because it helps you decipher and base your action on certain principles which are unshakable. They've been now around for 3,500 years, implemented in every single context, and it'll work for the next million years as well, because Bhagwanji is the one who's made this sansar.
Basically, I was discussing with Kavita actually. So it's the means to the end, like the approach to your action is coming from the anger side, or you have lifted yourself to overcome that situation. But the action that you're taking is not from the anger, but more from lifting yourself up from that situation. Like, for example, for example, I was driving, I learned driving at the age of 27, 28 after marriage. And of course, I was very scared. So my husband would also get angry that, you're not able to get it and stuff like that. And I remember there was a point where it really pissed me off to the point that I took it as a challenge, that I have to kind of drive. And one day I just, out of that anger, I took the car on my own and kind of started driving, and my fear went away. So the approach, but I feel thankful that he did that. And, he kind of pushed me to learn basically, or like a child, who is with a parent.
Just to, on that example, on that example, right, before we move on to the next example, it still stemmed from ego, right? Anger always stems from ego. Oh, how dare he say it? I can easily do it.
Yeah.
It didn't stem from faith. It didn't stem from purpose. It didn't stem from duty. And that's where we need to be operating from as a starting point.
So that's where my confusion is, because I didn't come out as like, look at me, I did it. I took it as a positive thing, thanking that he did that sort of a push, where I kind of took it as a challenge. So it's the feeling, the bhav, emotion changed, though it emerged from the
You have chosen
ego
a sample
ego
which
aspect.
suits or no. You have chosen a sample which suits your favor. If you otherwise think of it, anything in angry, whatever you have done, is it ended up in a positive way anytime? Say you are scolding your husband for that matter, or your child. So the day is going to be messed up, right? So whatever you typically do, act in anger, it's going to have its own consequence. That's the meaning of it. So you can pick and choose a specific example which suits the situation, kind of thing. But if you, in general, most of the cases, 99.9%, it's going to any decision in haste or any decision that you make in anger, it's not going to be yielding a positive outcome typically.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to what Vijay is saying as well, and I think I'm understanding a little bit of where you're coming from, Anupama. But in hindsight, I think all of us have used a lot of these tools to motivate ourselves to do things, right? Whether it's the competition, isne aisa kaise bol diya, I'll do it, etc. But this is the reframing we have to go through. That when we operate from that worldview, it's always you versus me. And me is the ego. That I'm an individual entity from everybody else, and this is a competition, and I have to get it. If others can, why not I? Vagera, vagera. This perception needs to change, where we're like, everything is for Bhagwanji, and he will take care of me. He will make sure. I have the faith that I step behind that car. He will allow, I surrender my fear to him. Please give me the strength to overcome my fear for that particular activity. And then
that is the point, suppose I started reading Gita only for past two years, I guess. And before, I was not in touch with Gita and what does it say and all that. So suppose for a normal human being who doesn't know Gita, and of course now I can say that I want to get out of this fear, and I would kind of take Bhagwanji's help and get the motivation and inspiration or energy, whatever. But suppose I don't know about Gita. So if my approach to it is where I see that though my ego got hurt, and I took it as a challenge in a positive way, and I did the right thing, and I can see the pros and cons of the action, and I feel good. Like, you understand when you scold your child, then because you will not feel good about it. And you would think that you could have done it in this manner as well. I just acted out of ego in a negative manner.
But the feeling good is also in the senses and the mind and the ego. They also make you feel
precisely
good. It's not a divine energy.
Yeah.
It's not a divine experience in any way. It is an experience
it uplifts you, but like if
but your ego will keep uplifting you till the day you fall. Right?
Then again, my question is my question is that suppose you are feeling like the bhav that you are doing, and the feeling that any action leaves you with, that should be the deciding point, right? That whether you did the right thing or not.
No.
How would you take a call?
But that's like saying I will have that extra laddu because I feel great about it.
Like basically likes and dislikes is definitely not the way to go about it, right? That's what we are talking about. To rise beyond likes and dislikes. How do you, so the difference is, how do you decipher the difference between the short-term transient happiness that you feel because of certain factors versus the bliss that is everlasting?
Yeah, precisely. So I'm talking about the bliss because, you know, the short-term feeling will not last long, because if suppose I take extra laddu, it will leave me with the feeling that I didn't follow the rules, and, you know, I kind of ate in spite of the instructions that I was not supposed to do it. So that gives a negative feeling because I didn't follow my own rules and what was right for me. But suppose you take a action and it's not a pleasure, it's a bliss. So as I said, that driving gave me immense confidence, which lasted me. Ashi, wait, beta. Which lasts even today, the kind of confidence I got. So that's my question, that, you know, if your action is driven not out of a pleasure seeking thing, but lifting you up in terms of the traits which lasts forever in your life. So that I mean, that's what my understanding is. That is the right way to approach, to take an action where it's not driven by pleasure, but
See,
more.
It's about also strengthening. So it's like you were saying, right? You know that the extra laddu is against the rules, not good for your body, so you will not like it at some point or the other. Now we know, because we all have the Gita in our hand, that the scriptures clearly say that the ultimate purpose of life is happiness and merging one with the divine. That's divine. All our journeys are culminating towards that direction at very, very different speeds, right? So now you're, as a Gita seeker, one, you should be aligning everything to these rules and principles. Anything non-aligned with this should make you be like, oh no, this is not the right thing to do, right? That's what we're all doing as seekers. The second part that you mentioned, which was also something I wanted to comment on, was when you mentioned about, sorry, it'll come back to me.
Okay, there's one more thing, Anupama. When you got angry because somebody says something to you about driving, right? How do you take that and how do you reframe a situation is different for everyone, right? Now, in your case, if you use that as a you versus me, and then you say that, oh, well, how dare he say this to me, and you get angry, and then you hold a grudge against your husband, that is behaving from anger. If, however, you use that energy that gets created from anger to reframe the situation, and then you say, okay, now I want to invoke my self-confidence and I want to invoke that divinity inside of me to go ahead and, learn this on my own, be, self-reliant. That is reframing the situation, recreating. A negative energy came to you, you reframed it into something more positive for yourself, then that is actually being divine. Then you're not acting out of anger. That is not acting out of anger. That is reframing the situation and then creating something more positive out of yourself. Now, how do you know if you've reframed it or are you acting out of anger? Are you holding on to a grudge against the person who created that situation for you? If you're not angry, you're not upset with them, you're not holding on to something negative for them, it is good for yourself. If you are grateful for the fact that you got put into that situation, you are grateful for the person who got you the message in the first place, because it allowed you to, go further, then you are not acting out of anger. Because when you are acting out of anger, you are not grateful. You're not.
So, Tuna, एक second. Let me just add on. We've gone off the track here. So, आपने जो बोला कि the person made you angry and that motivated you to do the action, and eventually you felt gratefulness for that person, for that situation, because that lasted with you for a long time. Now, here's the thing. If that is, you've given your locus of motivation to sansar, to somebody else. Today, that person was your husband who motivated you through his actions to make you drive by invoking anger. Tomorrow, somebody can invoke that very same anger for a very different reason, and you may do something else and something else and something else.
No, that's where the discernment comes, where
the discernment has to be very clear that, boss, things have to be done not from external locus of focus. Your motivation should not be external focus. It should be intrinsic.
Abhinav,
And that
but
will only
That is a
happen
good
if you're
point,
connected to divine. Your
Mm.
external motivation cannot be based on what people are telling you what to do, what not to do.
no, but
Your
Abhinav, when
motive,
you act and react in this world, and you're living in this world also sends you messages, right? There are trigger points, and then it is about how
but
you
if it makes you
work
angry,
with them.
Tuvana,
No, it made you angry doesn't mean that you act from that anger, right? It's about when your senses are acting with the sense objects, anger will come. You cannot say, oh, I will never feel angry. Anger will come, upset will come, sadness will come, but you will not act from it. You will experience it and then you will go on, right? We've experienced that, right? Well, so many times by now, like the whole idea that even I had initially that, oh, maybe I will just never feel this feeling ever again, has been, I think, by now demolished. I will feel that. I will just not act from it. Remember, this was the initial, those first few chapters, that was a constant struggle I had, like, oh, why am I still feeling this? Until we got that clarity that we will continue to feel that. It's like, oh, I'm going to put my hand in fire and say, hey, why am I still feeling fires? Why am I still feeling the burn? I will feel the burn, right?
But
Those-
Serena, Abhinav's point is kind of very bang on to the thing which I guess I was seeking that answer. So suppose, we get into the situation where unless and until we learn certain things and we lift ourselves up, we keep on facing that situation. And in spite of the fact that those are the trigger points where I get lifted up, to the next trait I should have. And I see the circumstances, situations, I keep on facing till the time I get out of it by changing my, self in terms of my thought process and approach. His point that suppose, when I was learning driving, I should have taken that challenge on my own rather than, driven by my own goals. I would not face that situation where anger is getting triggered or my ego is getting hurt. I am going in the right direction from the very beginning. So if suppose, my ego is getting hurt from any situation, there is a work to be done in myself because I am not operating from that level of approach to the situation. So that's why those anger is coming.
Agreed. So, the way God works, right? If you look at Krishna's Swamya Swarup, right? He has 4 hands and he holds 4 different things in his hands, right? And he talks to us using those 4 tools. So he will tell us what our next step is. He will first tell us, right? He will just, he uses his Kamal, right? Kamal is a very soft touch. He will tell us. Now that soft touch will come. We learn from it, then it's great. We've moved on to the next state in our life. We don't learn from it, then there's going to be Shank. Now, what is him talking to us? Him using his Shank means somebody screaming at us because he's not going to come to us directly, right? He will talk to us through VVGPs. So there would be a large situation which will cause us to be like, oh, somebody shouted at me, right? Then we listen to him. Great. We've learned our lesson and we move on. If we still don't listen, we continue the same way, then he is going to use his Gada. That means he's going to really hit you hard. Like, please listen now, like, change or like learn or do something, that whatever action you're supposed to do, a behavioral change, a skill thing that we're supposed to take on. And after that also we don't listen, then it will be the Sudarshan Chakra, right? Then it is going to be a situation where he will corner you in a way that you have no way out. You have to, there is nothing else for you to do except to change, do something different, right? Do what you need to do. He will put you in that situation. So those are the 4 ways in which he speaks to us. And what I was also trying to say to Abhinav is that how we behave or how we take on, the point is that external circumstances is Bhagwanji speaking to us in these 4 different decibels of volume, so to speak. And then we at some point of time will have to go and rise up above that. Of course, if we use that situation to harbor any kind of resentment against the VVGP that caused us to change, then we are creating further prarabdha for ourselves, further bondages for ourselves. And then it's obviously even if we create a positive material outcome, we've created a negative spiritual outcome for ourselves by creating a bondage. But if we are feeling grateful and we are able to reframe the situation, to be in a state of positive mindset, to be in a state of equipoise, to be in a state of gratefulness, which is one of the highest vibrations we can be in. At that state, whatever action we will take will be that of very high value.
Yeah, I guess that is kind of crucial that later when you lift yourself up and you have proven that you did it, you gave your best to the situation, and you kind of managed to give the positive outcome. The gratefulness should be there, that I am grateful. So that's the, I guess, the deciding factor where you operated from the negative ego or the positive ego, like, you know, which lifted you in the situation, basically. Guess the feeling that it leaves you.
Again, I think we need to do
Eventually
closing
we should
shlokas.
reach that
We need to do
status
closing shlokas.
before- yeah. But we should reach that state beforehand. Eventually our antakaran will get so cleansed and our intellect will become so much more sharpened that we don't have to depend on an after effect to realize what we did was right or wrong, but have that discernment before we act itself, right? Okay. So we'll do the closing shlokas now.
Yeah. Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kashchit Dukha Bhag Bhavate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Astoma Sadgamaya Tamsoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate.
Avashishyate. Om